Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach. Always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I am married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell. So you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
You get what you need. You know, this is Carol Jurgensen-Sheets. Hey, I'm Carol the Coach, and I am here to help you with your issues around sexual addiction. And I am so happy to be with you tonight, especially tonight, because, you know, one of the recovery tools that I ask my clients to use, Covenant Eyes. Another one happens to be Canine. Any kind of filter that keeps you on the straight and narrow. One of the most extreme is a polygrapher. I want you to try a polygraph test, not to get the addict in trouble, not to bust him or her, to help hold the addict accountable. You know, I have no doubt when I talk to different clients, they don't like the idea of being tested, but boy, it really helps their recovery, especially in the early stages. And I'm part of a listserv that's about 1,600 people strong. And what I know to be true is that oftentimes the polygrapher, if he or she understands this illness, they're so likely to do a fabulous job of testing, which makes things very, very worthy of knowing that things are gonna be really much, much better. You're listening to Carol the Coach. Okay, so what I know to be true, I'm sorry, I thought that was my guest calling in. What I know to be true is these kinds of tests really, really make a difference. They make a difference in so many different ways. They help hold the person accountable, which then helps them to work on the skills they need to. Like tonight, I was talking with several of my clients about objectifying. Now, a man or woman cannot help. They can't help necessarily noticing somebody. But what they can help to do is to practice the 3-second rule. And the 3-second rule is this. When you know that somebody has caught your eye and has really started that brain thinking about things that you shouldn't be thinking about. Practicing the 3-second rule means that A, you immediately start to eye bounce, B, you look away, and C, you practice thinking about something that's healthy. Maybe it's your children, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's a vacation, maybe it's gardening outside. You know, you're doing something that really makes a difference. And I cannot recommend that enough. That rule helps to keep people really set up in such a way that 100% you know that you definitely 100% are working a strong program. And again, to work a strong program means that you do what's right to decrease any behaviors that actually escalate your sexual addiction. If you have some questions about this, you can feel free to call me at 646-595-3284. Again, that number is 646-595-3284. And here's what I know to be true. That there are many skills that if you're an addict, you can use to do the next right thing. And that's really what recovery is all about, doing the next right thing. Oh, your brain may go a certain direction, but it's up to you to manage it and turn it around and make it different. And that's important for you. That's why I believe that you have everything you need. All the recovery tools, if you've done the reading, if you've listened to the show, if you're in with a good certified sexual addiction therapist, you know what to do. It's up to you to do it. And I'll tell you what, the secondary reason to use a polygrapher is because wives so much appreciate knowing that they can relax a little bit in between tests and they don't have to be so hypervigilant. They don't have to watch for every move. And that is really important because let's face it, it can be very, very difficult when you really want to build that trust with your partner, and yet they don't want to believe you. They're afraid to. They're afraid if they believe you, they'll get scammed again and they'll get hurt. So they don't. And I know that is really something that addicts typically face. And I want to help you to create the tools that will make your life a lot better. And one of the ways you do that is by using the polygraph test. So, that is why I recommend skilled practitioners, and we have one tonight. I have worked with him in so many different capacities. I mean, this is a man who really will tell a wife or husband, hey, you can't ask that question. He or she's going to fail because that's not a question that anybody can pass. For instance, do you notice other women? Oh, yes, if you're a man, you notice other women. And so he's not going to set anybody up for failure, as well as this guy teaches the course internationally and certainly to all of our law enforcement. So, you know, as a clinician, I highly recommend that you get somebody that you can absolutely trust who does a great job. Because like I said, our listserv, you know, they don't want to depend on just anybody because, you know, in some ways, their couples and their lives depend on it. They depend on somebody who's good and who's fair and who can do the job. So that's why I highly recommend that you get a skilled practitioner who can give a good polygraph test. And tonight we're going to be talking with Mike Turk, and he is amazing. He's going to talk about, a wide variety of people who utilize polygraph testing, and he's going to be talking about the 3 phases of a polygraph examination. He's going to be talking about the pre-test, how that's important, why it's important. Anybody who really wants to take a valid test. He's going to talk about why you only use so many questions, what are the countermeasures, and the terminology behind a good polygraph test. And I'm sure you've had questions about this. If you've never used it, likely you have. And if you've been one of those people that you've used several polygraphers and you've gotten different answers every single time, I say you've got to find somebody that you absolutely believe in, that you can stick with, because that's what's going to make the difference. And that's why it's so important. Okay, now, last time I was reading gratitudes that you need to have to do a nice job of turning any of your life situations around. And gratitudes are so important because they really look at what is working right and what isn't. And, you heard me as I was reading them last week. One of the wonderful things about one of my clients' gratitude lists was that he combined gratitude with reframing. He not only was able to turn around and come up with what was working, but he was able to talk about why it was the right thing to think and feel. That's important, too, because I'm telling you, when you start to feel good about a situation and you're able to reframe it and say, okay, now what did that situation have to teach me? How can I grow stronger? You take yourself out of the victim state and you make it just a much, much better situation. So I'm highly recommending that you not only use gratitude, but you also use something called reframing, which again is an incredible skill that takes you out of that victim state and puts you in a situation whereby you are able to look at how something's made you stronger. And hey, you can't do better than that when you're up against a really tough situation. And that is what we all have to do, whether you're a sex addict or not. Just the other day, I think I might have mentioned this last week, I got termed from Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is 80% of my income. And so when that happened, instead of freaking out, I said to myself, okay, well, this is why you have a good savings account, and you've been reinstated. You just have to wait 4, 6, 8 weeks to start getting your money again, and this will teach you how to live on a shoestring budget, and you can update some things that you've been putting off and make it right. And I just went on and on to myself about why it was a good thing. Somebody might call that Pollyannish, but I say it's a way to take a tough situation and not take it personally and look at the good out of it and feel better. And, it's the old adage of making lemonade out of lemons. As sex addicts, that's what you've got to do. Or if you love a sex addict, that's what you've got to do. This is going to teach you a lot of coping skills and strengths that you need to know. But you won't do that unless you're in some sort of crisis. That's how we typically are. We usually have to have a crisis before we make the choice to change our lives. And so look at what you're dealing with right now and ask yourself, how can you grow stronger? What did you learn from it? And when you do that, you'll be healthier as a result. And that's my promise to you, because I'm Carol the coach, and I happen to know that anytime we use that skill in therapy, it makes you a better person. And we're always talking about skills. We're always talking about what will help, and that's why we're going to talk about polygraph tests tonight, because it truly can make a difference in your life. And so I want to welcome Michael Turk onto the line. Michael, welcome to the Sex Help with Carol the Coach show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Carol.
Well, I am so pleased to have you because you know you're my own personal polygrapher. I mean, you have done a fabulous job with the clients that I've worked with. You've not only helped them to understand the test, but you've talked to them before, during, and after the test so that they really feel as good as possible about this situation. So tell me a little bit about how you got into this business and how you got into testing sex addicts.
Okay, sure. Well, I've actually been in the investigation law enforcement field for 43 years, and I've become interested in the polygraph in law enforcement. So I was fortunate I got to go to the Maryland Institute of Criminal Justice and graduated there in 2002. And then from then on in, I solely just did polygraphs. Well, the biggest thing that I liked about the polygraph was the interaction with the person. You actually get to sit down and talk to them, establish a rapport with them, and assist them in verifying either something that they're wanting to find out that is truthful or not truthful. And the polygraph is a great instrument and device that does that.
Okay, and are sex addicts any different than any other kind of person who maybe has learned how to lie to coexist with somebody that they love?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's an addiction, and anybody that has an addiction, and I know I'm speaking to the professor here, they learn how to hide and conceal things. And with today's technology and such a busy world with the social media and everything, they tend to hide. They don't want to be placed in some kind of category that makes them feel bad or whatever. But it is something, yes, that can be tested on, and it's important in terms of their addiction and their help to achieve their goal.
Now let's talk a little bit about the terminology, because obviously there's this technical term called PDD, psychophysiological detection of deception. Tell us a little bit about what that means and why that's important to sex addicts.
Okay, that basically is a government term. That the acronym is PDD, and just exactly what you described as psychophysiological detection of deception. This is important in terms of how a polygraph works. A polygraph works off the psychology part of it is your autonomic nervous system, and that's what the polygraph concentrates on, the autonomic nervous system. It's a fight or flight syndrome, and in terms of the psychology part, it's your parasympathetic or sympathetic side. The sympathetic side is where somebody will go into a fight or flight syndrome. The parasympathetic side is that part of that system that brings you back to your normal homeostasis. And with respect to testing, this is involuntary. If you look at your autonomic nervous system, it's involuntary. Therefore, when you're testing somebody to find if they're being truthful or untruthful, this is a part that activates in your system, the autonomic nervous system, which you can't control. So you could be the best person in the world to try to conceal something physically with your significant other, but the polygraph, in terms of that particular psychology part of it, is going to stick out. You could have the external vision of just being calm as can be, but internally your body is going to a fight or flight syndrome. The second part of that word, the psychophysiology, is we record three factions of your physiological data: the respiratory channel, the electrodermal channel, and the cardiovascular channel. Simply what that is your respiratory rate, A typical human being breathes 12 to 18 cycles a minute. The cardiovascular part of it is we do not record your blood pressure, your systolic or diastolic. We record your heart rate, the number of times your heart beats a minute. The electrodermal channel is, a lot of people may have heard about the old galvanic skin response. Well, the new technical term is the electrodermal channel. And what that is, your heart produces electricity, therefore your body sweats. And we measure that sweat gland activity with metal finger plates, and that's your electrodermal activity. So there's three facets there that we record your physiological data, and you encompass that and add that in to the autonomic nervous system. That's where you're going to get that psychophysiological detection of deception title.
Okay, so then is there a way to calm the body down enough to deceive test?
What you're basically talking about there, I think, is countermeasures. Countermeasures that have been around for a long time. Competent examiners are skilled and trained in the attempts of countermeasures. And the answer to that, the short answer is that is no. Again, it goes back, and I'll probably refer to this probably more than people want to hear about it. But it still amazes me after over 4,000 tests how the body reacts with the autonomic nervous system. You can't stop that. It's involuntary. A person can try.
They could take a bunch of Xanax and think, okay, I'm going to slow my body down so that it doesn't register any excitement.
Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. And unfortunately, I've had some clients come in that have tried that, and it just sticks out like an elephant in the room. And that is one of the questions that is actually asked in the pre-test about any kind of medications, and we try to nip that in the bud right before we even go into any chart collection.
Well, and I would think that would show such slowed responses that in itself would be an indicator, oh my goodness, this person must be on some sort of medication.
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And, it's so interesting in the meetings of my clients. There was a myth, probably an urban legend, that went around that said, yeah, well, if you put a pin in your shoe or a penny in your shoe, that will interfere with the polygraph. Have you heard those same kind of silly things?
Yeah. A pin in your shoe, or a coin, or something of that nature, or contract your gluteus maximus muscles, or something like this. But you have to also look at the big picture. If they're attempting to do this, then you have to ask the big question, why? And if they're trying to beat it, then the real reason is that they're just trying to beat the test, and they're probably going to be deceptive anyway. So one of the things that I use, and it's been required through the professional associations for many years now, is a sensor pad. All of my clients will be sitting on a pad that goes straight to the computer, and it records any kind of extraneous movement. When you're taking a test, you have to be completely still, just like you're having an X-ray taken. Now, clearly, you're going to breathe normal, but everything else is completely quiet and still. So there's a couple, actually, devices that are placed on you and you sit on that will detect any kind of extra movement or if somebody's trying to activate a countermeasure.
Uh-huh. Well, so now let me ask you, because you really explain this test in terms of three phases, the pre-test, the chart collection, and the post-test interview. So tell us a little bit about each one of those phases.
Okay. Those are the three phases that make up a polygraph test. And you start off with the pre-test interview. And this is very important. This actually takes the most time. In the pre-test interview, you're going to get a little bit of the biography about the individual. You're going to actually review their history, their physical history, and see if they're healthy enough to take a polygraph test, any kind of medications they're on, and get to know them a little bit. And during the pre-test here is also when you explain about the polygraph, what the components that are going to be placed on your person, what they do, what they record, what the examiner is going to be looking for. And then more importantly, when we establish all of those details, we're going to go in and sit down and talk about why we're there. And that's the very important part, to review the questions, to make sure the questions that are asked are actually the questions that we want to target and to find out. In a polygraph test, your polygraph test questions are so critical. Everybody has to be on the same music. The person taking the test, the polygraph examiner administering the test. There's no misunderstanding about any kind of content, and that's your pre-test, and that takes the most time, but that's very, very important that that's done properly. The second phase is your chart collection. This is actually when the tested person is sitting in the polygraph chair. There's a specific chair that they make for polygraph tested people. And this is where the attachments are actually placed on you. The respiratory tubes, the electrodermal plates, and your blood pressure cuff. And this is where the actual questions are asked and answered, and then the data is collected on the polygraph software, which is computerized. And the third phase is the shortest phase, is the post-test. And everybody that does, well, let's say poorly, or has some significant or deceptive reactions, they're asked what was their thinking process, what was going on when that question was asked, and they have an opportunity to explain that. That's kind of the cleanup part of it. And then, we discuss how the test went, and usually at that particular time we can give them the results of the examination.
Well, and I know that for my clients, they meet with me. I have already worked with the partner, whether it be a man or a woman, to come up with the questions that I think are reasonable. Sometimes I get them approved with you. Sometimes I know that they're reasonable and they don't need that approval. They'll be just fine. And we actually give them to the addict, him or herself, ahead of time so that they can talk a little bit about how they may pass or not pass that question. And, again, I don't use it to bust, if you will, an addict. I want to use it to build trust. I want my partners to feel better as if this person is telling the truth. Now, that doesn't always happen, but more often than not, it's really utilized as a tool to build trust as opposed to break trust down. And so we don't hide that from them. They get an opportunity. And, on occasion, they'll say, no, I would answer that no, or I would answer that yes. And then 24 hours later, they do come back and say, you know what, I don't think I'd pass that question. So I always give 24 to 48 hours before they're scheduled with you so they can clarify that, because you ask my clients not to have over 5 questions. And I'm sure there's a good reason for that, correct?
That is correct. That's the maximum questions that's recommended to ask, because what happens, Carol, is that when we run, and you're absolutely right. You make some great questions. You make my job a lot easier. And many times, the night before the test, there are some extra things that come out. So many times when we meet the clients and the addicts, the significant other and the addict, we will have something additional that has been accomplished where we can have an admission and that they can work forward on that. But, yeah, it's very critical that they have that and review that, and that seems to be very successful. The reason for the limit of the questions is that these questions have to be asked more than one time. So I can get enough physiological data to make an analysis. If we just ran one test, you'd probably have a very, very high rate of failures. So we run at least 2 to 4 charts, and that's one series of each list of questions that we ask. And the reason we limit that is because of the person. They have to be completely still. There is a small amount of pressure regarding the blood pressure cuff. But I bet you if you asked your clients afterwards how they felt, they probably said they felt physically exhausted, because it's something that they really have to concentrate on, and it does take a little toll on them. And I want them to be fresh. I don't want them to be exhausted. We want to give them the best test possible. So that's why we limit the questions.
That totally makes sense. And I just find that not only would it be exhausting, but clearly a lot of times people want to ask the same question in different ways, and there's just no need to do that. So does a person who's scheduled to take a polygraph have any special preparation prior to the testing other than extra rest?
Well, that's a great question. And many people ask that. Number one is, yes, they should be properly rested. Please don't come to the testing date with any alcohol or illegal drugs or anything like that in your system. If you are prescribed medication, please take the proper dosage. Come just like you were to the test, just like you would want to report to your job and do a good job and be alert. Don't come exhausted. Don't come impaired. And basically that's it.
Okay. And so really, other than keeping their life the same as possible, so if they're on some sort of narcotic or an anti-anxiety, they don't take extra. They stay with the same amount. They take the same amount of antidepressant. And you really want them to get good rest and then just come in ready to trust the test itself.
Absolutely. And you're right. They're coming there, and they're coming there for a purpose. A polygraph examination, the ones I do at least, are not confrontational. We sit down and talk just like we are now. If you come in and you decide that you're not being truthful, then that's on you. And then there needs to be some work done. And it's not a big interrogation where you're have yelling and screaming. It just isn't like that. We want them to be successful, but for them to be successful, they have to help themselves. And I think the polygraph, that's what that does. A polygraph not only can detect being untruthful, but it verifies somebody being truthful and gives them some reward for their hard work that they do if they succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you have pointed out, and I've pointed out, polygraphs not only detect deception, but they also can validate the truth, and that's what I'm using it for. It's interesting, Mike. I used to say, if I ever had to use a polygraph with couples, I'd rather slit my wrist. But now what I know is it really is a helpful tool, one, to build trust in the partner, but two, to hold the addict accountable. If they're questioning, should I cheat on my wife? Should I look at that porn? Should I go to that chat room? And they know that every 4 to 6 months they're going to get tested. It's an extra measure for them to say, I don't want to light up that reward center. I really want to calm the reward center and the brain down. And what we find is the more often they can keep that center turned down, the easier it is to combat the temptations.
Absolutely. It is an accountability tool, and I think we should use it as that. And that's the same thing with the sex offenders. It's basically the same concept. They're court ordered to come in every 6 months or so to take tests because they must be kept in check. And I think the same philosophy, I think, applies to the addicts. There's always this temptation, I'll just cheat a little bit, I'll just here and there, and then it starts spiraling out of control.
Yeah, so obviously you talked about offenders, and I typically don't work with offenders, although I used to work with perpetrators in a welfare system, and I worked with them and the family members that perhaps they had molested. And what I found with them was that clearly a lot of them were good people that had made some really poor choices and developed a course of life where they really continued to exploit an individual. Now, you do this with offenders. Do you see any difference between the offender and a sex addict who doesn't molest kids. I mean, they're literally somebody who cheats on their wife, or they look at porn, or they're in chat rooms, or they expose themselves. I mean, is there a difference that you can tell?
Well, there are different. A sex addict doesn't mean that they've been a lawbreaker in terms of something that's statutorily against the law. I think the comparison I was trying to use was that the behavioral habits can mirror each other to where a human being will be susceptible to maybe follow the path that got them where they were at. Yeah.
Well, and I know you're not a psychologist. I just wondered if you could see a difference as they were sitting in the chair there, if they were more nervous, if they looked like they were in more shame, because you definitely, this is what you do for a living, correct? You're retired, but you do this full time.
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. So now, how often would you recommend, if somebody wants to use polygraph tests for a couple of years after the discovery, after they've disclosed everything to their wife or husband, how often would you recommend that they take a polygraph test?
I would say until all parties involved felt comfortable, I would at least what we call a maintenance test, periodic test, accountability test, at least every 5 or 6 months. And then even at that, you may want to look at it yearly. But from the start, I have a lot of addicts that come in every 2 or 3 months because they want to keep their own accountability and keep them in check. I think that the time frame would probably be best based on the individual and how they're succeeding. But I would not go more than 6 months.
Yeah, so anywhere from 4 to 6 months is pretty average. Would you not agree?
That's correct.
All right, and then you said for maybe a couple of years minimum just to help keep them in check, and certainly it sounds like some of your guys and women perhaps come in voluntarily even when their partners don't need them to because they know it's a tool to hold them accountable.
That's absolutely correct. They somehow go back and say, I don't know how I got there. I'm glad that it's changed my life, and I don't want to get back in that habit or that rut. That's not me. And I always tell all the addicts, the clients that come in, I'm going to be truthful with you. That's my job. I'm going to tell you what I see, and it's for your own good. Some days it may not be what you'd like to hear, and some days it may, but that's the accountability part of it.
Got it. And then I'm curious because very clearly there must be some times when somebody fails it and they start to challenge you. This didn't accurately test me. You didn't do it right. How do you handle those situations? We analyze that question, and I say, okay, why do you think that you didn't pass this? And then we start going back from the day they came in into their activities. And you would be surprised when we go back and say, well, I was watching this movie, and I just, I really did. Well, no, wait a minute. Maybe I did see that nude scene, or maybe I did see that sex scene. And I say, well, now let's think back when that question was asked. Do you think perhaps you were thinking of that? Your memory took you back to that, and you'd be surprised. Well, yeah, it could have been. I said, well, that's probably what was your problem. And again, I'm going to revert right back to, like I said when I first started, it still is amazing to me how the autonomic system is so effective when it works with a polygraph, because of the way our brains come back and just can bring back memories that could be harm or threatening to us. They'll pop right up. And then what we do is we go back and try to analyze it. I'm going to help them. We're not, like I said, we're not there for controversial reasons. We're there to help you. But
if you think that there's been a bad analogy of the data, well, let's go back and see. Many times I'll show them the actual data on the chart, not that they know what they're looking at, but it's like, I'll tell them we're looking for consistency, very significant chart grams that have been proven throughout the years and years and years that show people have significant reactions and deceptions, and they can see where it happens actually on the charts. And I said, well, here's what I'm talking about. So let's go back and talk about this. And we try to work through it, and we try to figure out why the person didn't do well on that question.
And I'm kind of curious because I'm sure the polygraph tests range in price all over the country and maybe even the world differently. But here in Indianapolis, where things tend to be pretty reasonable, your pricing is typically 5 questions for $250. Do you find that to be a typical cost of a polygraph test?
It's very low rated from what I do. I'm probably a terrible business person. I enjoy doing the testing. I'm fortunate that I don't have to charge $500 every test.
Right.
I enjoy the challenge. One of the inventories that I had in one of the last professional polygraph associations that I did, they review all your data and they inventory everything you do. My biggest problem was I don't charge enough money. That's not a problem to me. So, no, and the thing about it is I think that's a very reasonable price. A lot of folks would say, well, is it like a certain dollar amount per question? No, certainly not. It's not. I explained why there's a limit on the questions. There's actually a lot of work. I try to communicate with the client, the addict, the significant other, many times ahead before we even meet in terms of email, so we can work out a lot of the time even before we meet. So that's time spent that if you start adding up the time, it becomes in several hours. So, and that's just me. When I go to any kind of test or case, I want to be as prepared as possible to give the best test as possible. So no, I don't. I think that's a very conservative rate.
Okay, so since this is globally heard around the world, you actually can get this show through iTunes. Do you know the average that somebody might expect to pay if they don't live in Indianapolis?
Oh, the range is anywhere from $500, $600. It just depends on the examiner. It kind of, I guess, in the range like you've talked about, geographically, the East Coast or the West Coast should be paid much more. I've talked to one of my colleagues up in northern Indiana that actually charges twice as much as I do, and they get the money. It's just not me. That's not what I do. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you sound like a guy with a good heart, and I relate to that. It's the same thing with me. One of the things that Dr. Patrick Carnes, who founded Sexual Addiction, says is that we should be charging like a specialist, and yet I take insurance. And I just really feel like if we can pay it forward, and if we love what we do, and that's certainly what you said, there's not really a reason to, I don't want to say exploit, but make extra money off of something that we really love.
I feel the same way. I feel I'm blessed to what I've done, what I've been doing, and I feel I'm very good at what I do, and I enjoy it, and I love to help people. And I've got to cover. I have to cover costs. I have to cover insurance and rent and all of that. But it's not all about that. I mean, sometimes you have to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now I have just a couple of questions to ask you. You mentioned kind of a time frame. So how long does a typical polygraph examination take?
Okay. Well, that's a great question because it kind of follows with what I was just talking about. The time that the addict, the significant other, we meet, we're probably going to be face-to-face maybe 60 to 90 minutes. That's just the polygraph, the 3 phases. And once again, that pre-work ahead of time saves us time in the office. If we just met blindly for the first time, trying to discuss our questions, get a test organized and put together, we could be there 2 to 3 hours. So that's why I don't demand it, but kind of request that we communicate ahead of time. And this takes a lot of the stress off of both people, all the people that come there. So you're talking 2 to 3 hours for a good polygraph test. A lot of the work is done before we meet. Once we meet, we're looking at 60 to 90 minutes.
Okay. 60 to 90 minutes, and again then, the amount of time that you spend preparing as well as writing up the examination is typically how long?
I probably at least an hour and 15 minutes before I even meet them. The polygraph test has computerized templates. So what I do is I'll review the questions. I'll see what they want to be asked. And again, I compliment you. You're very good at drafting these questions. So my work is really cut down because if I didn't know any better, I think you might have attended a polygraph class or something. But the questions can't be compounded. They can't be convoluted. They have to be easily answered with a yes or a no. There can't be any ambiguity between the question because it's not fair to that person taking the test. So that's my job, to draft, to construct that question where it can be asked, where it can be answered with a yes or a no, but it can also be asked to cover what is needed to be found out.
Well, you know, for instance, I had a partner who was putting together a question, and she said, have you objectified anybody in the last 4 months? Well, lots and lots of people objectify, so he's going to, if he says yes, she's going to be angry, and if he says no because he didn't fantasize and he didn't imagine having sex or, you know, grooming her or whatever, it's still going to end up failing. And so I thought, you know, you can't ask that. You what you can ask is, have you practiced your recovery tools when you saw a good-looking woman? And that is almost always a yes. If they're in good, strong recovery, they will have practiced those tools. I mean, this is an amazing program that really helps sex addicts to know what to do when the addict in them shows up.
Absolutely, you're exactly correct. And that's a perfect example. A perfect example.
So, how do you treat the partner? I kind of know this, but the partner is not in the office with you, is she?
During the pretest, yes. During the pretest, when we go over the questions, and the reason for that is that most of them want to be, and then once we come up with the relevant questions, then the partner will have to go to the waiting room, and then just the addict and I will spend some time, and we'll once again go over the apparatus, the components, go over the questions, and then we'll conduct the test. But when we do conduct the test, it's just the person taking the test and the examiner. But I encourage the partners to be there because, again, Carol, many times when we review these questions, even though they've reviewed them prior to coming in, there may be something that needs to be modified or something like that. And I would rather do that and get a good examination taken with both parties, the addict and the partner, agreeing and already established on something that has been accomplished but they agree upon, as opposed to running a test and getting a failure and then where something could be prevented. This way they can move forward.
Well, absolutely. So then you see them ahead of time. You go over the questions. She knows what you're going to ask. Then she leaves the room. She goes out in the waiting room. You spend the time with your client. And then after the test has been given, don't you typically call her back in to administer the results and talk about them some?
Absolutely. Absolutely. She comes back in. We sit down, go over the questions. I'll give them my analysis, my opinion of what the results are, and if there's any questions or anything there, then we'll go through those. And then sometimes I have to tell you there's some admissions after the test, and then the addict and I are going through the post-test, and there may be a couple admissions, and then we'll discuss those with the partner. So again, it's an accountability, it's an information gathering, it's ongoing. So yes, that's absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. So, in some ways, you're really dealing with a very stressful situation if information has come out, or oftentimes my clients, the partners, are so traumatized they can't believe when they passed the test, or they can't believe they passed a question, and they're dumbfounded. And so you're dealing with that. Are you sure you did it right? Are you sure he was being honest? That's got to be a little tough on you, Mike.
It is, because 50% of the people aren't happy one way or the other.
Right.
But I'm confident that the tests are good, and I understand that you're exactly right. That's why I don't know how he did that, but he did, and then I guess then they have to come back to you and say, wow. How did this happen? But it happens because people can make improvements.
Oh, absolutely. And I have to say, I have never felt like anything you have ever done was wrong. And so if I get somebody who absolutely can't believe it, it just is diagnostic for me. It says, you know what? We need to work with this woman to really get her to begin to trust something that she's just really having a hard time trusting, even with the polygraph test substantiating that. And, certainly the hundreds and hundreds of people that we've worked with, there's always going to be a couple of people that are having trust issues that don't want to believe it because they don't want to get hurt again.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me see if I got everything answered. Now, you said, obviously, someone can be tested more than one time, but there should be a time difference. I mean, it's not like they can be tested at 10 and then they have to come back at 2.
Right, that doesn't work. No, that does not work. There should be some time in there, at least 4 to 6 months. This is something I think maybe I need to bring up. If there has been some miscommunications between myself, the addict, or the partner, and it's just a total miscommunication, I'll retest that person for no cost, but I would still ask that there be a couple weeks in between, so there's kind of like a diffusing time there, and then we can retest that. That hasn't happened, but that's why I pay so much attention to the work ahead of time before we even meet.
Yeah, I was going to say, certainly in my caseload, that has never happened where you've had to retest and done that at your own cost. You just do such a good job of preparation. And just let my listeners know, you've actually trained police departments all over the country. You certainly are available to our Indianapolis Police Department. Tell them a little bit about what you do.
In terms of
your training, and you don't just administer polygraph tests. You train people as to what these are about and how to use them.
Well, no, I don't train any polygraph examiners. No.
Oh, I thought you did.
No. I have trained in the police departments with investigators, law enforcement, field training in terms of that. But no, I don't train any polygraphers now.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Well, you've certainly helped clear up a lot of information, and so I really appreciate people are scared of polygraph tests, and really, again, with the right examiner and the right preparation, they're almost foolproof. I don't know if you've ever seen cases where they weren't. Can you reference any of those?
Well, there's always there's always good professionals and bad professionals. I would just encourage that anybody that uses any kind of professional, just vet them, do their due diligence, and check out their credentials, their training. But you're right. If you have the right person and you prepare, a diagnostic test is very, very high in accuracy.
And a sociopath, somebody who lacks a conscience and has no empathy, are they any more likely to pass one of these tests?
A psychopath should not even be given a test. If they have no caring about anything, if they could go out here and just mutilate 10 bodies, they are not a testable candidate.
Got it. So just hearing that, if there, obviously that's not a sex addict, but you do hear about psychopaths. I call them sociopaths, but psychopaths. So that would be somebody that you would not even administer a test to.
That's correct.
Got it. Well, thank you so much, Michael Turk. You've been very, very helpful. My listening audience, I'm sure, really appreciates it. And just keep doing the fine work you're doing. It is just such a pleasure for me to get to refer to somebody like you.
Well, thanks for having me, Carol. I appreciate it.
All right. You have a great night.
Same to you. Goodbye.
Bye. All right. Well, so that was Michael Turk, and obviously he is somebody who really knows what he's doing when it comes to polygraphers and doing the test. I can't speak highly enough for how seriously he takes his job and what a fine job he does. And so here's what I would ask you to do, because I know you all don't necessarily have a Michael Turk in your area. You want to interview a polygrapher and ask him or her if they've ever worked with sex addicts. You want to compare what you heard from Michael to what this person may be saying. You want to ask for references, look at the website, really figure out, is this person qualified? And, it may be that you go and trust your gut. If you just didn't think that you got what you needed, then use somebody else the next time. But when you do find somebody like Mike, you'll know that he's in it for it to be a win-win for everybody. And that means he wants to formulate the questions so that the sex addict is honest, so that the partner feels good, and so that the trust can be rebuilt. And that's why it's so essential to use it as one of your 10 tools. And so I appreciate you listening tonight. You did a great job of paying attention to the shows that we have here. I'm getting more and more feedback. Here it was Sunday night last night, and I had somebody who not only left me a message but sent me an email response that said, Carol, I just want you to know you're changing my life, my wife's life, and you're educating us, but you're really making us feel good about our progress. And that's what this is all about, sharing hope, strength, and recovery for the addict, for the partner, and for the family involved. You are listening to Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And as I say at the end of every show, there only is going to be one of you at all times, so fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. We will catch you next week. Look forward to it. And make it a good one, would you? All right. Talk to you later.